Abba Yahuwah, thank you for another adventure in your word. We're looking forward with excitement to see more of you. Amen.
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 The title of this week's talk is, You Can't Buffalo Me!
Wow.
So, got this buffalo hide behind me here. I'm up in Montana. The appropriate headgear.
Right? That's so much here.
Something like that. So, just so everybody knows, last week I was at the ranch. Yeah, we got like about 3.5 hours of something recorded that we tried all week to get to Kurt, and it was unsuccessful, but it'll be made available if anybody wants to see it. So hopefully that was just something that you guys would have been able to have access to.
What was it on Mountain Air, or what's it on?
It's on nothing.
Well,
right
it'll
now.
go up on, Kurt's going to get up here, but there was a problem trying to send it Dropbox and speed of internet, and we tried half a dozen times or more different places, and Dinah's going to go into a copy place tomorrow and see if she can get them to just upload it to him. For whatever reason, there's just been trouble trying to get it to you. But it was the Shavuot at this particular place. So it wasn't a word study per se. It was, the first one was basically talking about the phrase Hodu la yuaki tov ki le'olam chazdo. That's the first hour and a half. The second hour and a half, they had a fellow singing some opening up with some worship songs, and they were, one of the songs were from Paul Wilbur, I think, and part of the phrase was, take me into the Holy of Holies. Like, what does that even mean? And I was thinking about that, and this Mishkan pattern thing is not just pictures or elements, but it's actually, as we've talked before, this consciousness of frame of thought. And if it starts with the big white fence, barbecue grill, the laver, it's progressing, menorah, table, showbread, altar of incense, then the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies, lining up with Shemini Atzeret, the day of Shabbat, letter Sadi. And so, regardless of what the author of the song meant, because nobody was allowed into the Holy of Holies, the Kadosh Kodeshim, only the high priest, the Kohen HaGadol, on the day of Yom Kippur, and that only for a few minutes to sprinkle the blood. It wasn't like this casual, just walk on in, like come boldly before the throne of grace concept. It was not allowed. And I had made mention, there was a lady that knew the song I was talking about. On YouTube, there was a song where a lady singing, but the video is the Mishkan out in the wilderness somewhere, and there's this one priest, Levite guy, and he's kind of tending the thing, and she's sneaking in behind him and going into the Mishkan. And it's like, that's really corrupt. She would have been stoned to death, killed. I mean, you can't do that. Even a guy couldn't, but not a woman. What the heck is that video about? And there was a lady there at the meeting that knew which video I was talking about. She'd seen it. She hadn't stopped to think that it was a good thing or a bad thing until I made mention of it. But what do you mean, take me into the Holy of Holies? Well, when you turn everything into spiritualize it, now you can. But the reality is, with real children of Israel, they were told to do certain things and not do certain things. And if you transgress that instruction, you're in big trouble. Which basically is what today's talk is about. So I thought it was an appropriate correlation, the talk we did last week. So I'm going to talk about Deuteronomy 4 a bit. But in order to cover Deuteronomy 4, we got to cover a little bit more. The interesting thing about Deuteronomy is...
Are we starting? So you're starting. Yeah, so I'm gonna turn off the cameras and microphones. I got the first page of the notes in the chat. You guys want to follow along? I'll see you in a bit.
Okay. Apologize for the tea, but I've been fighting against a throat issue all week, and this hot honey and lemon seems to cut through the aggression. So the book of Deuteronomy, well, here, we'll just go look at Deuteronomy 1. Deuteronomy 1:1. These are the words that Moshe spoke to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan concerning the wilderness, concerning the Arabah, opposite the Sea of Reeds, between Paran and Tophel and Laban and Hazeroth. And it was in the 40th year, the 11th month, and the first day of the month, and Moshe spoke to the children of Israel. So basically, they've just spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness because they didn't trust Yahweh to do what he said. He said, Canaanites have compromised themselves with their wickedness. Their time is at an end. Therefore, everything's prepared for the people of Israel to just pick up, go in, and possess the land. And the children of Israel, even though Yahweh had just taken out the Egyptians and crossed the Red Sea of Reeds, they said, no, he just brought us here to kill us. He wants to feed us to the giants. And Yahweh said, because that's who you think I am, that's because you really would rather believe that I hate you and brought you out here to feed you to the giants, you're all going to die in the wilderness. A whole generation. And then your children, who you thought I was going to have be the giants hors d'oeuvres on their table, like pierced olives, they're going to take over the giant's land. So we have to be careful what we believe. But that's what Deuteronomy is. And when you get to the end of Deuteronomy, the third page that I just sent Kurt, I didn't actually write out any of the meanings of it, left it open. You could even, a couple other verses there I didn't get a chance to process. We're not going to talk about it today, but you can just look at the words there. Deuteronomy 10, 12, and 13 is at the bottom of page 2. And now Israel, they had taught Israel, Ma Yahweh, what does Elohim ask of you? This is what's written on the bottom of page 2, which is Deuteronomy 10, 12, and 13. Chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. What does Yahweh, your Elohim, ask of you as his people? But then it says, La Yira et Yahweh Elheka, that if Ki would be, if to perceive Yahweh Elohim, and La Lachat, walking with all that call Derek Yo. So it's that you set yourself to walk on this path with that Yahweh is your Elohim, and that you love him and serve him with all your heart and all your soul, and that you guard mitzvot of Yahweh, that's the commands of Yahweh, and is in his chok, het kuf, which is his, it's translated law, precept, ordinance. It's a command, but not exactly. So they always make this difference between chok, that's het kuf, and mitzvot, which is mem zadi vav tav. Well, the vav tav is plural, but zadi vav is this word that shows up all the time. Zadi vav is command. Zadi vav vav tav is one who mans a crew, joins on a team. join the colors, as it were. So if you're going to be on his team, his people, his kingdom, what did he say? Do what he said. So the word matzah, matzot, mem zadi vav ta, is the same exact word. To find out how to do something is to find out what did he say to do. Zadi vav. And so here, this verse 13 of Deuteronomy 10, guard, Aleph Tav mitzvot, guard what he commanded, Yahweh, and what he chok, Asher Anki. Asher is who, that which, Anki is the word I or I am, commanded you, that's the word Mem Zadi Vav Kaf, Hayom, this day, Letov, Laka, Letov, for good. So what's the big deal? A number of years ago, there was a certain fellow who wrote a book, and the point of it that I saw in the point of what he was making, and then I have a couple other friends who jumped on the same bandwagon, quoting from Ezekiel 20:24, and we've mentioned this before, it says, 3 times in Ezekiel 20, Yahweh says, I gave you my stuff, my instructions, my commands, which if a man does, he will live in them. Well, I'd have to check it out in Ezekiel, but to live in them is the prefix letter bet, which can also mean with and among and through. But Israel wouldn't have it. They kept doubting that it was any good. They kept thinking that he was just oppressing them, that he hated them. He was just wanted to beat them up, just wanted to afflict Israel, ultimately feed them to their enemies. Israel has suspected Yahweh to be up to no good for their whole entire history, all the way back to the beginning. And here Moshe is talking about this, and he even addresses that in Deuteronomy 32 with the Song of Moses. So Yahweh says, listen, how many times does he have to say it? This is for good. Latov. Is he lying? If he says, I gave you Zadivav and Het Kuf, command and order for good, shouldn't that just be the end of the matter? So last week when we were talking about Proverbs 30 and we got to verses 7, 8, and 9, it seemed like what it was saying was that he gave us these Het Kuf laws so that when we would do them, there was 2 benefits. Remember earlier, Agur says, 2 things I ask of you before I die. And the word Shin Tav there versus Shin Nun, meaning both words can mean 2. Shin Tav can mean one thing taken twice, or 2 aspects of the same thing. Let foolish, vain, worthlessness be kept far away from me, and deception. Just purge me of deception before I die. Just let me come to the real truth. And then at the end of that passage, I think that's up in, I think that was before Proverbs 30, verse 4. Anyway, the point is, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. The end of the matter was, if you do what he said to do, if you asha, ayin shin hey, his het kuf, there's 2 benefits, both of which play into the 2 things that Agur was requesting. And the 2 benefits are that it gives you access like it was a secret key to place of refuge, protection, safety. And it's an expectorant that will cause you to cough up this phlegm of deception. So for Hagar to say, oh, please, before I die, just cleanse my soul of worthless nothingness and deception, lies. Just want the truth. Okay, do what I said. Asha Kok, Ein Shin Hey, Het Kuf. And he says here it's for good, and he says in Ezekiel 20 that if a man does what he said to do, he will live. Well, these people, Yahweh goes on to say in verse 24 or 25, depending on your text, that because Israel kept refusing to believe Yahweh, kept refusing to walk in his ways, he said, okay. So a couple times Yahweh said, I was going to kill you. I was just going to wipe out all of you, kill you all. But I didn't want to profane my name in the face of all the other nations. But now I'm just going to scatter you into the other nations and give you their bad laws that nobody can live by. Now, I take that as meaning, well, that's the laws of the nations. You know, the bad laws you can't live by. Like recently we heard within the last few months that farmers were commanded by the federal government to plow under their fields, or else the federal government was going to send in drones dropping herbicides and kill and ruin the fields. And other people have been commanded to butcher their flocks and kill their herds. Other people were told to close up shop and don't open for business. It's like, what's going on? Well, bad laws nobody can live by. You can guess what might be going on. Apparently there's a couple hundred food processing plants have been burned or exploded or something in the last couple months around the United States. Gee, why would that be? The point is, Yahweh said he'd send us to a place where his Torah was inaccessible, and we'd be dominated by overlords who would lie to us and have the whip on our back, and we couldn't live by their laws because we refused Yahuwah's laws. I find it interesting that another tactic, Yahweh seemed to empower an adversary to tell us we inherited lies. The Torah is lies. And so these people are looking at Ezekiel 20:24 and says, well, bad laws nobody can live by. That's stuff for Torah. That's the scroll of the Torah. It's not the laws of the nations that are bad laws nobody can live by. It's the Torah. And so there are Torah teachers that have been teaching this now for a number of years. A friend of mine said that his uncle or somebody that he knew 50 years ago was teaching the same thing. So this isn't a new concept, a new teaching. And the fellow who wrote the book about it that other people picked up and ran with, this was not an innovative teaching. It was a reactivated perspective. So we're going to read in Deuteronomy 4 here a bit. Why I wanted to read that thing in Deuteronomy 10, 12, and 13, just two verses makes it really clear. Love him and serve him with all your heart and all your soul. How do you do that? Guard his Zadivav and do his Het Kuf. That's it. And it'll be for good. We just can't go with that. So the past, well, specifically this last week or two, I've been talking to people about this matter and saying, what? Two questions. One is, you hear people say, are you doing the Torah? What does it mean to do the Torah? It's like, how many laws? When I first started going to a congregation almost 20 years ago, yeah, it's been 20 years, Torah study, 613 laws. Oh, gosh, no wonder nobody wants to do the Torah. What are they? Okay, throw me the list. What are they? Couldn't seem to find them just written out. Somebody finally came up with a book, pretty thick book. It's like, wow. I just wanted to see a list of like bullet points. Boom, 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 613 laws. And the book didn't seem to have it. Finally found it. But it's like all this other writing and talking about it. What does he want from us? Gosh. We'll be our Elohim and we'll be your people. Okay, great. Now what's it going to cost us? What do we have to do? So think about this. If somebody says, you doing the Torah? Oh, yeah, I'm doing the Torah. What does that mean you're doing? 613 laws? Come over for only for the priest. You killing animals? What are we supposed to be doing? What's the issue? And so when you're talking to somebody about regarding the Torah, I was talking to a fellow yesterday, and he says, he went to some Bible study a while back. I was open for questions and said, hey, what about the Sabbath day? No, that's for Jews and Jews only. Really? In fact, even the guy with the Bible bus talking about the 10 Commandments. You don't have to keep number 4, only keep the other 9. Really? Really? You're trying to buffalo me? Then the guy said, hey, what about the festivals? No, Jews and Jews only. Really? So you look at chapter 4 here. So I'll read out of the stone Tanakh here. Now, O Israel, listen to the decrees and the ordinances. Okay, here we go. Legal whack whack. Shema, the het kuf, and the mem shin pei tet, mishpat, mishpatim. That's plural. A mishpat is judgment. Here it's called ordinance. Shofet is the word for judge. So the book of Judges in the Bible, right after Joshua, is called Shofetim. Shofet. Shin pei tet. Shin can be a prefix letter. So if you looked at it in the dictionary, it just means judge. But look at pei tet. Pei tet means stalemate. Stalemate. You're playing a game, playing basketball, and you each get an even score, 20-20 or whatever it is. It's like balanced scales. Nobody has any leverage or advantage one over the other. That's pei tet. So balanced scales of justice is mem shin pei tet. To determine what is fair and right, where no person or no side, no interest is bribing or extorting or pressuring the other side, but you have fair and equitable exchange or trade. Everybody's happy. That's mishpat. It says, I believe it's in Psalms, we talked about this before, that mishpat and tzedakah are the foundation of Yahuwah's throne. He's so much into this mishpat business that his throne is built on it, established on it, which means whenever his throne is, you might say, allowed to rule or enters a situation, like thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You know what's going to happen? Mishpat. Ordinances. Ordinances. You know, to spin the English language to be the most detestable words. Law. Ordinances. Decrees. What a way to get people to run. That's great. I think he's allowed this on purpose. If in this Ketkuf law, he has the secret key hiding the access to the place of secure refuge. The more detestable it looks, the less people will do it, which shows their heart. So for people to say it's the Sefer Torah, bad laws nobody can live by. Okay, no Torah, great. So Jesus comes along and dies on the cross. Why? To nail the Torah to the tree, by golly, and get it out of our consciousness once and for all. Whew. Thank you very much, Jesus. Jesus dies on the cross, nails the Torah right there with him. We never have to think about this stupid law ever again. And so when you talk to somebody who's of that particular perspective, and you go to mention something about what we ought to do, should do, required to do, why do they get so violently angry, upset, disturbed? Why? So if you sit there and say, out of 613 laws, which ones are done away with? All of them, all 613. Really? Well, the tithing law, that one still holds. Oh, okay. Trying to remember, the guy was saying, he was told by somebody the other day that if you try to keep the Moedim, if you try to keep those laws, you're going to burn in hell. You've lost your salvation. I thought there was no law. How can there be a law that says if you try to keep the Moedim, you're going to burn in hell if there's no law? The law would have had to have been changed from you better keep the Moedim if you want to be my people to, oh no, we're going to change the law and says, if you keep the Moedim, you're not my people. Yeah, okay. So the people who believe that the God who says if you keep the Moedim, you're going to burn in hell is supposedly the same God who said to Israel, you must watch, keep, and guard the Moedim to be my people. When did he change his mind? Maybe he changed his mind while Jesus was hanging on the cross. So he didn't say so, but it must be that, because we have to figure this out, because it doesn't say so in his word. So what else did he say here in Deuteronomy 4? Now, O Israel, listen at Shema to the Ketkuf and the Mem Shin Petet, Chok and Mishpat, that I teach you to perform so that you may live. That's just like he said in Ezekiel 20. Yahweh speaking here. And you will come and possess the land that Yahweh, the Elohim of your forefathers, gives you. Now, wait a minute. This sounds like it's Moshe talking. So, yeah, it's not Yahweh speaking, it's Moshe talking. That listen to the ordinances that I teach you to perform so that you may live. Verse 2, you shall not add to the word I command you, nor shall you subtract from it, to observe the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim that I command you. Well, right there. Do not add and do not subtract, to observe the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim. Anybody who wants to be this people has to regard these first couple verses of Deuteronomy 4, which means they have to be alienated from the entire consciousness of the group of people who think they were nailed to the cross and eliminated. So the question is, who moved? Did Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, command Moshe, tell them they must observe? They must observe. That word observe is shin mem resh. To hear is shin mem ayin. To do is ayin shin hey. So these three verbs are the primary verbs used over and over and over again throughout the whole Tanakh. Shema, Shomer, and then Ayin Shin Hey could be pronounced as Asha or Osei. Osei Fele, hasn't he done wonderful and marvelous things? So if Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, said, primary, you must, Shema, Shomer, and Asha. And this other group says, no, he changed. You must not Shema, Shomer, and Asha. Who's the real God? You're getting buffaloed. You will not add to it nor subtract from it. To say it was nailed to the cross, isn't that subtracting from it? To say you should keep all 9 but not the 4th commandment, isn't that taking away? And why would this guy with the Bible bus say you should keep 9 of the 10 if they're all done away with? Makes no sense. Why is it that the closer you start looking at stuff, the less sense it makes? What mechanism do we have to determine if we're being bamboozled? Oh, that's right. Remember, we talked about it in Proverbs 30. Do what he said. If you do, Ayin Shin Hey, the hook, ket kuf, it'll give you a place of refuge. It gives you access to the fortress of defense, and an expectorant to cough out the, how did you describe it, Greg? Buffalo mouth is feels like a herd buffalo just went through and dropped a few things along the way. Do what he said. Oh, no, you don't have to do what he said. As a matter of fact, if you do what he said, you're going to burn in hell. Why would he allow a voice of authority to so deceive us, to so lie to us, that they can say exactly the opposite of what Yahweh said, yet claim to be his voice of authority on the face of the earth, like the vicarious Christ or something? Vicarious Christ. I'm Christ's mouth on the face of the earth, and I'm saying, I'm declaring that if you do what Yahweh said, you're going to burn in hell. The only way to go to heaven and not burn in hell is to not do what he said. We're making that a law. Wait a minute, I thought he did away with the law. You see what's going on? Is it that confusing, really? Looks like it's pretty simple and clear to me. Here's another verse, verse 3. Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did with Baal Peor. For every man that followed Baal Peor. Now, nobody apparently seems to know very well what that is, but the word Baal, that Ayin Lamed, is where you get the word for Lord. And Peor, Pe Ayin Vav Resh, means to gape open. So at that event, though it doesn't specify, some people think it had to do with some illicit physical activity. We'll leave it at that. He says, every man that followed Baal Peor, Yahweh your Elohim destroyed him from your midst, but you who cling to Yahweh your Elohim, you're all alive today. See, I have taught you decrees and ordinances as Yahweh my Elohim has commanded me to do so in the midst of the land which you're coming to possess it. Verse 6. You shall safeguard, that's Shin Mem Resh, and perform, that's Ayin Shin Hey, them, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the people who shall hear all these decrees and who shall say, surely a wise and discerning people is this great nation. So he says, listen, even if you guys think it's a bunch of bunk and a bunch of stupid junk that now we got to do this, what a loser God we have that he makes us follow these little. Yahweh's going to put this high regard of us in our enemies' eyes, even if it's not in your own eyes. For which is a great nation that has a God who is so close to it, as is Yahweh our Elohim, whenever we call to him. Whenever we call to him. Someone was telling me just the other day about a book, I think it was, where a guy was saying, maybe it was on the internet or something, the guy says, God answers every prayer. It might take a little while, it may not be how you want it answered, but he answers every prayer. Well, didn't we talk about numerous times in the book of Proverbs where Yahweh says, he who turns his ear, that means turns away, that same word for turn is Shabbat, Shin Bet, to turn around, to repent. It's also to rebel, to turn from his ear from hearing the Torah. Whoever rebels his ear from hearing the Torah. Even so, that's Gimel Mem, that's this mirror, likewise reciprocal. His prayers are an abomination. Can't be heard. Yahweh talks about in other places that your prayers, if you're not listening to his voice and walking in his ways, your prayers will just bounce off the ceiling. Make the heavens bronze, one way of it's like, well, that's weird. This guy who wrote the book says God answers every prayer. So his God answers every prayer. But the Elohim of Israel, Yahuwah, doesn't answer every prayer. Well, that sounds like a better God. You might want to check out that other one. What I'm saying is that as we read through here, Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, is identifying himself. Who is he and what he's about? And for people not to like that God and decide to invent one for themselves with different character attributes, no law, answers all the prayers, fully loving and kind, well, those aren't bad things. Dresses up a certain way for certain party days. Sure, why not? Invent your own God. But then, I think it's in Isaiah, it says, can a man invent gods for themselves? They're not gods. They're not Elohim. Can a man make holy days for themselves? They're not holy days. If Yahweh says, these are my Moedim, they're his Moedim. If humans make feast days, party days, that's their own stuff. You can't invent your own thing and attribute it to Yahuwah. You can invent your own thing and invent it and attribute it to your own fantasy God. Go ahead and do that, but it's not Yahuwah. So the question is, how do we know who Yahuwah is? He tells us to listen. He tells us to guard his Zadi Vav command, and he tells us to do, Ayin Shin He, look that word up in the red dictionary. Work, make, do, force, compel, press, squeeze, cause, produce, positive, proactive. Therefore, anybody who says that has nothing to do with us and our God, they have alienated themselves and their ideology and their culture from Yod He Vav He of this scripture. Verse 8, Deuteronomy 4. And what is such a great nation that has righteous decrees and ordinances, such as this entire Torah that I placed before you this day? It says elsewhere that Moshe was told to, in Deuteronomy, write the words of this Torah and put it in a wooden box and set it there as a witness against you. And that's the phrase that they take as saying, see, it's against us. Bad laws nobody can live by. He says, this great nation that has righteous decrees and ordinances, this entire Torah, the entire Torah, what part of the entire Torah do you think is the bad part? The next verse, 9. Only beware for yourselves. That's Shamar, I believe. And greatly beware for your soul. Beware and greatly beware. That's Shamar Laka ve Shamar Nafshaka. Nefesh is your soul. So see whether it says beware or guard. There was another place where it's just the word warning, and that's also the same word shamar. So you'll see that different English words all are sometimes the same Hebrew word. Beware for yourselves, beware for your soul, lest you forget the things that your eyes have beheld, and lest you remove them from your heart all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and to your children's children. That's why we keep the Moedim. Teach these things to your children. There's some churches that do not teach the Old Testament, that do not teach the book of Deuteronomy, do not teach the history of the nation, of the family, as if it wasn't theirs. The day that you stood before Yahweh your Elohim at Horeb, when Yahweh said to me, gather the people to me, and I shall let them hear my words, so that they shall learn to fear me all the days that they live on the earth, and they shall teach their children. Verse 11, so you approached and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain was burning with fire up to the heart of heaven, darkness, cloud, and thick cloud. Yahweh spoke to you from the midst of the fire. You were hearing the sound of words, but you were not seeing a likeness, only a sound. He told you of his covenant, and he commanded you to observe the 10 declarations, and he inscribed them on 2 stone tablets. Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you decrees and ordinances. That's Mishpat and Chok. That you shall perform them in the land to which you cross to possess it, but you shall greatly beware for your soul. There's the word Shamar again. For you did not see any likeness on the day Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb from the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and lest you make for yourselves a carved image, a likeness of any shape, a form of male and or female, a form of any animal that is on the earth, a form of any winged bird that is in the heaven, a form of anything that creeps on the ground, a form of any fish that is in the water of the earth, unless you raise your eyes to the heaven and you see the sun, moon, and stars, the entire legion of heaven, and you be drawn astray and bow to them and worship them, which Yahweh your Elohim has apportioned all the people under the entire heaven. But Yahweh has taken you and withdrawn you from the iron crucible from Egypt to be a nation of heritage for him as this very day. That word heritage is Nun Chet Lamed, Nachal, or Nachala. And it means possession or acquisition. So he's saying here, he's put it within the hearts of man, the mind of man, to be easily fooled, easily drawn away with, ooh, sparkly, shiny. Let's go for that. Remember the fourth beast in Daniel 7 had copper claws. Well, the word copper means also, it's nachash, the same as serpent, and it has to do with shiny and the word enchantment. People want to be enchanted. They want to be mystified. They want to think that something is so, esoteric knowledge. Whether you throw it into the realm of magic and sorcery, that's an aspect of it, or Kabbalah, that's whatever that is, but people want that. Something written in the stars. I believe personally that our study that we did on the constellations is different than that. But Yahweh says here, he has put that, he's apportioned it to all the people under the heavens, that they would be easily led astray by such things, but not Israel. Verse 23, Yahweh became angry of me because of your deeds. He swore that I would not cross the Jordan, not come to this good land that Yahweh your Elohim has given you as a heritage. I will die in this land. I'm not crossing the Jordan, but you are crossing, and you will possess good land. Beware for yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, that he is sealed with you, and you make for yourselves a carved image, a likeness of anything, as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you. Is this why it's called the Old Testament that was done away with for the sake of the New Testament, where we have the image, the carved image of the man, our God, hanging on a cross? That's why this must be the Old Testament done away with, right? Beware for yourselves, be greatly aware, beware and aware, lest you make for yourselves a carved image, a likeness of anything. Yahweh your Elohim, he is a consuming fire, a jealous, it says here in Stone Tanakh, a jealous God, but in Hebrew it says El Kona. That's Aleph Lamed, Kuf Nun Aleph. El Kona. Verse 25. And I'm saying this because this is right at the beginning of Deuteronomy. The first 3 chapters, Moshe is just kind of setting it up. And this is it right here. This is Yahweh. He's telling you to do what he said, and he's telling you no image. Everything else is secondary. His identity has to do with, he told us to do something and no image. Any ideology, any religious doctrine that has, don't do anything, there is no law, there is no command, and you can have all the images you want, is not even him. Can't be. It's so contradictory to what he says right here. Verse 25, when you beget children and grandchildren, or will have them long in the land, you will grow corrupt, and you'll make a carved image, a likeness of anything, and you will do evil in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim to anger him. I appoint heaven and earth this day to bear witness against you, that you will surely perish quickly from the land to which you're crossing the Jordan to possess. You shall have lengthy days upon it. You will not have lengthy days upon it, for you will be destroyed. Sorry, it's really hard to see what I'm reading here. Yahweh will scatter you among the people, and you will be left few in number amongst the nations where Yahweh will lead you. That's where we are now. So this right here, verse 27, brings us to present tense. 28 of Deuteronomy 4. There you will serve God, the handiwork of man, of wood and stone, which do not see, do not hear, do not eat, do not smell. From there, verse 29, you will seek Yahweh your Elohim, and you will find him, if you search for him with all your heart and all your soul. When you're in distress, and all these things have befallen you at the end of days, you will return unto Yahweh your Elohim and hearken to his voice, as if that was the trouble all along. Hearken to his voice. Shema Bakolo. Listen to his voice. So the problem for the last 3,000 years, and I say 3,000 because you got 2,730 since the northern kingdom was taken into captivity. You got about 2,500 years since Daniel would have changed the language and all, but they started going downhill for a few hundred years, going all the way back then to the days of David was the last time anything looked like it was on the right track, was about 1,000 BC. So we're about 3,000 years. 3,000 years of nobody listening to what he said. And the recovery is listen to his voice. Shema Bakolo. For Yahweh your Elohim is a merciful El. He will not abandon you nor destroy you, and he will not forget the covenant of your forefathers that he swore to them. We read other times, he said, even if you forget, I'll do the remembering for you. He will not forget the covenant of your forefathers. The one that was nailed to the cross. I maintain personally that the Torah, the covenant, The relationship between Yahweh and Israel was not nailed to the cross, except for the fact that Yeshua was the embodiment of the word, and by nailing him to the cross, metaphorically, the word, the Torah, was nailed to the cross, but he resurrected. Remember that? Yeah, they tried to do away with it. They tried to say it was dead and buried, and we don't have to deal with it anymore, and it came back, remember? So I choose personally to take that as the metaphor, that it's still perfectly vital and active. He will not forget the covenant of your forefathers that he swore to them. For us to go back and learn this Hebrew, for us to go back and for me to say I'm regarding that the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet is the stipulations of the covenant. What do you mean? How is Aleph a stipulation? What is Gimel and Dalet and Mem and Nun? How is that a term of the covenant? Well, you have to know how to read it. What's the covenant? What's the terms of the covenant? What are we supposed to be doing? If you're doing the Torah, what are you supposed to be doing? In all the conversations I've tried to have with people to find out what other people might have thought about the same thing, it boils down to this. Keep the Sabbath day. Regard his keeping of his Moedim. Don't eat what he said not to eat. Exalt his name, Yahweh. Those four matters as we walk in the integrity of Tzedakah, righteousness, which is emet and hesed, truth and kindness. Well, that's 5. What about the other 608? Where's all those other 613 laws? It seems like it boils down to just those things. Keep the Sabbath day, keep the Moedim, eat what he said to eat, or don't eat what he said not to eat, because it'll abominate you. What's so offensive? Why do people find that so detestable, reprehensible? How dare you tell me to do that law? Really? Truth and kindness? You're offended? Why? Best I could determine, especially talking this week with people, was it isn't necessarily what the law is, it's the fact that there is a law. That's the offensive matter. So when people yell at you, there is no law, that's the only issue. The fact that Yahweh would have the invasive demand into your serenity to say, don't work. How dare you? The fact that he would say, the commanded gathering, the Kra Kodesh, gathered together these 7 occasions throughout the year. That's a rude invasion of my life, my personal determination. How dare my God do that? Why, if he's going to do that, he's not my God. I'll worship the God who doesn't put any of those demands on me. Why is it that the people that have gravitated to the God who doesn't give them any chok or zadi vav, if they gravitate to the God who doesn't do that, don't they still count on there being laws like if you believe in him, you get to go to heaven? That's hopefully a law, right? If we believe in him, we get to go to heaven. Isn't it some kind of a law of justice that says if there's a sin sacrifice, then you can be deemed atoned for and forgiven and cleansed? Isn't that a law? Or else it can't happen. I've mentioned before, I've talked to people and said, what is truth? And somebody said truth is whatever you want it to be. Somebody else said there is no truth. Like, is that true? Is it true that nothing's true? You get locked in a circle. If it's not true that nothing's true, then something's true. And that yet, human mind is locked into this cosmos of thinking. Yahweh built that. From there you will seek Yahweh your Elohim, and you will find him if you search for him with all your heart. How do you conduct that search? With all your heart and all your soul. When you're in distress, yep, here we are in distress. The end of days, well, certainly these days, whether it's the end, who knows? You will return unto Yahweh your Elohim. Book of Deuteronomy, that's not the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's these words, this book, hearken to his voice. For Yahweh your Elohim is a merciful God. He will not abandon you. So we can bet that if we turn to these words and figure out what does he want us to do, that he has been waiting and he'll respond. It's kind of like the prodigal son story. For inquire now regarding the early days that preceded you, from the day when Elohim created man on the earth, and from one end of the heaven to the other end of the heaven. Has there ever been anything like this great thing, or anything like it ever been heard? Has the people ever heard the voice of Elohim speaking from the midst of the fire, as you have heard and survived? Or has any God ever miraculously come to take for himself a nation from amidst a nation? Now, this is what we're going to look at the beginning of the second part here. It says, with challenges, with signs, with wonders, with war, with a strong hand, with an outstretched arm, greatly awesome deeds, such as everything that Yahweh your Elohim did for you in Egypt before your eyes. You have been shown in order to know that Yahweh, he is the Elohim. There is none beside him. There's no other.